Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. For literally 70 years, the public has been totally captivated by these stories of visitors from the stars. We've all been waiting, expecting the government to eventually just pull back the curtain and reveal detailed records of alien biology. But when the US government finally opened its vaults in 2026, well, the reality was a massive pivot from what everyone expected. So today, we are unpacking the biological lore that's completely dominated pop culture, an absolutely mind-bending scientific theory about our own DNA, and the sobering truth of what's actually inside those official files. I want you to consider the ultimate biological paradox for a second. If these entities are truly from other worlds, evolving under entirely different gravitational, atmospheric, and solar conditions, why do they look so much like us? Why are they almost always described as having two arms, two legs, and a head? Are we looking at actual alien visitors or some strange reflection of ourselves? Our cosmic relatives? Keep that question in the back of your mind as we go through this. To really understand the massive gap between public expectation and the actual government data, we have to first set up the decades of lore. For the last 70 years, ufology has described this terrifying yet frankly fascinating paradox of distinct bipedal humanoid entities supposedly visiting Earth. According to countless eyewitness accounts, abduction testimonies, and whistleblower claims that have spread like wildfire in books and media, the universe isn't just full of life, it's full of life that shares our exact basic body plan. When you dig into the documented lore from sources like the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, the reports generally fall into four main species. First, you've got the Greys, often described as engineered beings with slight builds and large craniums. Second, the Nordics, who are remarkably human-like, standing 7 to 8 feet tall. Third, the Reptilians, possessing scaled dermal armor and cold-blooded features. And finally, the insectoids, who exhibit an exoskeleton and are sometimes even seen wearing long robes. Now, despite these massive morphological differences, they all share that exact same humanoid baseline. The reptilian lore is particularly deep, actually. Often described as crossbreeds, like a reptilian-gray hybrid, they are said to have vertical slit pupils, 3 or 4 long fingers, and these lean, powerful bodies. And the theories behind them are wild. They range from claims that they're an indigenous Earth species that evolved underground, all the way to stories of a draconian ruling caste from the Alpha Draconis star system. Then, in stark contrast, we have the Nordics. Abduction lore describes them as incredibly human-looking, blonde hair, blue eyes, and communicating entirely telepathically. The lore suggests they're genetically compatible with humanity. Some even think they're a primordial race that seeded the galaxy. And certain researchers claim they've proposed alliances with Earthlings to protect us from the more malevolent species out there. Which brings us to a really fascinating scientific attempt to explain this whole humanoid paradox. In January 2026, Dr. Shavarsh Kochiarian published a peer-reviewed paper in Frontiers in Astronomy and Space Sciences. He proposed a hypothesis called Directed Information Panspermia, or DIP. The idea is that an incredibly advanced civilization didn't just seed primitive life on suitable planets, which is the concept known as directed panspermia, but they actually encoded a profound message within the biological structures themselves, literally written into the genetic code. So the absolute crucial point here is that according to DIP, our very DNA could be an ancient, interstellar source code just waiting to be decoded. The sending civilization introduces primitive life, encodes a message on a highly stable genetic carrier, and then simply waits for biological evolution to run its course. Eventually, a communicative civilization, like ours, emerges, carrying the message of its creators in every single cell. It beautifully answers why any visiting intelligence might look like us, right? Because we share the exact same engineered origin. But here is where the story takes a massive turn. In the spring of 2026, the public fully expected the curtain to be pulled back on recovered crafts and genetic seeding. But the reality was vastly different. Out of the initial 162 declassified files, there was absolutely zero biological material. And get this, 100% of the cases were explicitly labeled unresolved. Section 2. The Pursue Pivot. Inside the official 2026 ledger. So, PURSUE stands for the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. Directed in early 2026, the goal was unprecedented transparency, literally putting everything the government had on a public website. Over the spring, the Department of War dumped hundreds of files online. We saw an initial 162 files in early May, another 222 files with military infrared footage a couple of weeks later, and by June 12th, things got really interesting, with reports of massive mother orbs launching smaller smaller objects near military facilities. And to give you a sense of the scale here, this number, over 400, represents the sheer volume of military and civilian incidents covered in these releases. These records span 8 decades and cover every major theater of military operation. We're talking about a massive, systematic documentation of encounters that the U.S. military and intelligence community simply have not been able to explain. So what's actually in these files? Well, we have incredible transcripts from the Apollo and Gemini missions, including astronaut Frank Borman reporting a bogey alongside Gemini 7 and Buzz Aldrin detailing sightings in deep space. There are modern reports from 2023 of federal officers encountering spherical objects, orbs launching orbs, in the western U.S. We've got recent combat zone infrared tracking from drone operators and historical military logs going all the way back to 1944. It's an absolute treasure trove of anomalous data. Now, the way government officials frame this release is entirely focused on transparency. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth noted that keeping these files hidden behind classifications had fueled justified speculation for years. By releasing them, the administration aimed to combat public skepticism and basically allow the American people to look at the raw data and make up their own minds. FBI Director Kash Patel and Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard echoed this as well, promising an ongoing, comprehensive declassification effort. But the most critical finding from the government's perspective really hinges on a single word: unresolved. The Department of War explicitly stated that an unresolved case simply means a lack of sufficient sensor data to make a definitive determination. It does not mean the object is a confirmed extraterrestrial craft. So the void left by the collapse of official silence isn't being filled with aliens, it's just being filled with unresolved data points. When you stack the decades of ufology lore against the cold, hard government ledger, the disconnect is honestly jarring. Despite public expectations of secret labs, the official PureSue release explicitly contains no biological entities, period. There are 0 files containing non-human material. There are no recovered alien vehicles, and no official U.S. government investigation has confirmed any sighting as extraterrestrial technology. The data shows anomalous activity in our skies, for sure, but absolutely 0 biological proof of Greys, reptilians, or Nordics. Naturally, this massive data dump was met with intense skepticism from the scientific community. Astrophysicist Dr. David Whitehouse reviewed the May release and bluntly concluded that many of the files are just optical artifacts, fuzzy blobs, or obvious balloons, offering, in his words, no evidence whatsoever of anything artificial and alien. Other astronomers pointed out that eyewitness accounts, even from highly trained pilots, can be historically unreliable, and the released videos often lack the necessary context for rigorous scientific analysis. So, we are left with this genuinely fascinating paradox. The government files are finally open, revealing hundreds of truly unresolved cases that have baffled our military for 80 years, yet the deep biological lore of humanoid aliens remains completely absent from the official ledger. If there are no bodies and no crafts, why does humanity continue to project our own biological image into the stars? Are we truly alone, just chasing camera artifacts and optical illusions? Or is the truth encoded somewhere we haven't quite learned to read yet?